Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
All right, Joe Biggs will also be on the nightly news tonight, filing a report and more. He's coming back to Austin here very soon with our great crew, and they've got a lot of HD video they're going to be compiling on their investigations into Islamabad and other facilities, Detroit, you name it. This is only leg one of what's going to be a three-part investigation, two more parts coming. Shifting gears out of whether this was a false flag or not. They let them in. They protected them. They attacked us. I believe more of this is going to continue to happen. But, Joe, looking at Obama saying everybody agrees we should, you know, if you're on a no-fly list, you don't get guns. Well, no, they put innocent people on those. It's made up. Those are a fraud and complete garbage. This is an outrageous announcement that he wants laws passed to just put us on magic own gun list.
What would even spark that to even come up in conversation? That's what I don't understand. Neither person involved was on a no-fly list. So why does that pop up in regards to what happened here? And like you said, there's been people who've known to be preppers, people who work in Homeland Security that are even on the no-fly list. So anybody could get put on it, and then that could stop those people from being able to purchase a weapon to protect themselves. I just don't understand where his reasoning comes into
because
this.
He wants to be able to put us on list with no court. It's called dictatorship, yeah.
But I mean, I just don't understand how people in large numbers don't see through that.
No, I get it. There's no logic. It's an inversion of reality. No. They're waging war on common sense.
I mean, the fact that, like I said right before we went to break, the fact that he's saying that Americans are scared. I don't believe Americans are scared. I think they're pissed off. They're fed up. They're angry at the fact that we have the leader of the free world, who was, quite frankly, what a retired lieutenant colonel said last night live after the interview, a PU-55 Yankee. I don't want to say the word out, but I mean, if you spell it out, you write it down on a piece of paper, you understand what I get. This lieutenant colonel, live on TV on Fox Business, called the president that last night, and indeed, that is what he is. He is the one that is scared. He is the one that is helping these guys out. He is the one that's bringing this terror, and then saying that we're scared. We're not scared. We're angry. We want a president who's going to stand up and do the right thing and protect our country and make sure that they have our best interests in need. This guy does not. He is treasonous. He should be impeached. But like you said, we're about a year away. It's not going to happen.
Well, it needs to. I mean, just they need to back off. I mean, let me tell you, this is a hardcore group. When on a bunch of channels they said, well, there was a Christmas tree, well, they were Jews, they were Christians, and then now they just come right out and say it. Hey, in major newspaper, hey, it was a guy was a Christian, that's bigoted. He was the problem. I mean, what type of freakazoid thinks that, much less puts it in a newspaper?
Yeah, I mean, this whole story just stinks to high heaven. You know, we're going to, in a minute, we just found the location of where the actual shootout was. We're going to go out there and investigate that, see if we can see any bullet holes in the fence or anything like that. Because, I mean, it's really odd to have, you know, your supposed dead suspect on the ground and they're both handcuffed. It's a little weird. Well,
what about when they let MSNBC in to contaminate the crime scene 2 days after, and the bed hadn't even been thrown? Nothing, walls hadn't been torn out. Yeah, that place had hardly been rifled through.
Yeah, but they're saying, yeah, exactly. The police are saying that, oh, we were done with that. We'd already cleared it. We'd gone through everything. That's just super suspicious. And that even sounds like something that was staged in order to kind of help push the narrative they're trying to get out there.
Yeah, I tell you,
who goes in and shows that stuff? That goes against journalism 101. You don't show people's IDs and things like that, especially when there's an ongoing investigation. No one knows what's really going on. It seems like they're like, hey, look at this. This is how it really is. See, it's right here. See, look, this is how it is. And instead of just letting the evidence come out and point to that.
The standard operating procedure across the board is being turned off. They're flying in plane loads of people and not even looking at their IDs and telling us in the news. And I mean, normally, for months, that had been walled off. They had torn the walls out, torn it all out. We're told it's a bomb-making factory. Where are the bombs once we get in there?
I mean, it's hard to believe that could even be in there. I walked over it. That's a very small area. It's close-knit to everything. These are like little duplexes. Every garage is beside every garage all through there. There's no way that in this amount of time...
Now, you guys shot some amazing drone footage. Your reports are at Infowars.com on the Nightly News tonight. Great job with the journalism with you and Josh and Mr. Zimmerman and everybody else. Great job. And I know you're going to get back in Austin the next few days. Get out there, talk to that lady, talk to others, and keep it up, Joe. Great job.
All right, thank you.
All right, folks, pray for those guys. We'll be right back with Paul Joseph Watson from London.
We're back. It's the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show, Overdrive, with me, your host, Paul Joseph Watson. I'll go to some of your calls in the second half of the hour. But first, this breaking news out of Sputnik: suspected pro-ISIS refugee in Germany injures 2 police officers. These are the orphans and widows that Barack Obama says we shouldn't be worried about. A refugee shouted pro-ISIS slogans while attacking 2 German police officers who were responding late on Sunday to reports of a rail fare dodger in a railway station in the northwestern city of Osnabrück, police said Monday. So this is just breaking right now. The man has been identified as a Moroccan asylum seeker by police in the German state of Lower Saxony. No evidence linking the suspect to ISIS has emerged, although he was shouting Allah Akbar and pro-ISIS slogans while biting and attacking police. Again, a refugee who had just recently come in from Morocco, another one of these orphans and widows that we should have no concerns whatsoever about, according to President Barack Obama, which leads me to this story out of Breitbart.com. Migrants on video. Paris attacks good. By 2025, all of France will become Muslim. When asked on camera whether it's good to kill French people for Allah, Muslim migrants seeking asylum in Italy answered affirmatively, remarking that it's good to kill French people and warning of a looming December 8 Islamist attack on Rome. That's tomorrow. Of course, we know all the ISIS propaganda is centered around attacking Italy. They see that as the beginning of the final battle for their caliphate. But in a disturbing new video produced by the Italian television program L'aria Chatira, What's Trending, presenters asked some asylum seekers and other migrants what they thought about the November 13 Paris attacks. The program interviewed migrants at the largest refugee center in Europe, located in the Sicilian province of Catania, asking what they thought about the Paris massacres. Listen to what they said. Remember, these are the orphans and widows that Barack Obama says we've got nothing to worry about. So they asked Christians about it first. One Christian migrant, of course, the vast majority of the refugees pouring into Europe are not Christians, they're Muslims. 4/5 of them aren't even Syrian. So they asked a Christian migrant from Africa what he thought about the Paris massacre. He said, I'm sorry for Paris. We are Christians, we don't kill. Presenters then asked a Muslim migrant whether he thought the slaughter of over 100 people in Paris was a good or bad thing. Good, the man replied. Pressed further whether he thought it's good to kill French people, the man responded, yes, French, it is good. To the third question, whether it's good for a Muslim to kill for Allah, the man again replied, yes. Again, which is in line with all the polls, especially the Pew survey, which I've highlighted, which shows that the majority of Muslims in most Middle East and South Asian countries agree with this. They think that stoning women is acceptable, beheading gay people, killing people who try to leave the religion of Islam is all perfectly acceptable. So there's no surprise that when they go and ask these migrants in these camps in Italy, they come back with many of the same responses. The article continues. The program interviewed a 23-year-old Muslim migrant named Ahmed, who's been in Italy for 5 years, who shared his opinion of the Paris attacks, as well as the future of Islam in Europe. Outside the mosque in Catania, Ahmed told the journalist that, quote, by 2025, all of France will become Muslim. Look, he said, referring to the Paris massacre, it wasn't us foreigners who did this. They were born there, kids like these, who grew up and learned things about ISIS and Islam, and they did it. What I'm saying, he continued, is that our Quran said these things. So even the Muslim migrants there in the camp in Italy admit that this call to violence is in the Quran. It directly orders Muslims to go and kill the infidels, and the passages are right there for everyone to see. But of course, Barack Obama is still afraid to even say the term Islamic terrorism. So they interviewed all these migrants at this camp. They praised the Paris attacks. And these are the people that are going to be coming into Europe. They already have. In that case, they're going to be coming into America. And again, Obama says they're just orphans and widows and there's nothing to worry about. And you go back to Germany, where we just had another attack on police, as I just mentioned. The hospitals there are completely failing to cope with this migrant invasion. And they're actually having to hire security guards to be with the nurses during nighttime hours in these German hospitals because these migrants are just attacking the nurses. They're lunging at the nurses who are trying to give them free frigging healthcare, biting them. This is the culture that we're importing into Europe. And of course, ISIS again is bragging that it's going to infiltrate the West via this refugee program. This is out of the hill. ISIS has targeted refugee program to enter US, chairman says. Intelligence officials have determined that Islamic extremists have explored using the refugee program to enter the United States. The head of the House Homeland Security Committee said on Monday, this just broke an hour ago. Michael McCall declined to go into detail about the determination which the Obama administration has not announced publicly. Again, orphans and widows, that's all that Obama will say about it. Yet the disclosure could add ammunition to critics of the White House's refugee plans who have warned that the program is vulnerable to infiltration by adherents of the Islamic State. ISIS, really? Do you think? Maybe you should actually go and read ISIS's own manifesto, their own propaganda, where they brag about how they're going to exploit this refugee program to infiltrate jihadists, just as they did for the Paris massacre. They actually went down to the Hungarian border where these refugees were coming in and hired some of those individuals who carried out the attack. Of course, the mastermind himself behind the Paris attack bragged about how he was able to exploit this migrant red carpet to plan the bloodshed in the capital of France. So we had this article last week, which didn't get much attention. ISIS brags about exploiting refugee program to send sleeper cells to Europe. A newly uncovered 99-page manifesto produced by the Islamic State brags about how the terror organization has exploited the refugee program to send jihadist sleeper cells to Europe since 2012, with the goal of creating Muslim no-go zones in Western cities that can be used as a base from which to launch further Paris-style attacks. So if you actually read this full manifesto, which I did, it says, basically brags brazenly that they're going to exploit the refugee program to create Muslim ghettos like the one in Molenbeek, Brussels, Belgium, which was the source of the planning for the Paris massacre. It was the ghetto that we walked into and got chased out, got told that we couldn't go in a restaurant because we were white, basically. So that's what ISIS wants to do. They want to create more of those no-go zones where police are afraid to venture, where they can get weapons, military-grade weapons on the street within an hour for €500. And they're going to exploit the refugee program to do that. And yet still we've got this narrative that it's just about orphans and widows. And we saw that again after the attack in San Bernardino. Of course, Loretta Lynch came out and said that we need to keep an eye on people who are spewing anti-Muslim rhetoric. Now she's had to walk that back to some extent. This is out of Politico.com. Lynch recalibrates message on hateful speech. Attorney General Loretta Lynch Monday appeared to recalibrate remarks she made last week that suggested the Justice Department could investigate speech deemed hostile towards Muslims. Of course, we prosecute deeds and not words, she said at a press conference. Some conservatives criticized Lynch for her comments to a Muslim civil rights group where she lamented, quote, the ability of people to issue hateful speech of all types from the anonymity of a screen. But if Loretta Lynch really wants to crack down on violent and hateful speech, maybe she should start with the Quran, because there's quite a lot of it in that book. She also said, quote, I think I can't say definitively right now what led either of these two people, in reference to the San Bernardino shooters, to pick up guns and become murderers, said Loretta Lynch. Well, I'll give you a clue, Loretta. It begins with is and ends with lamb. I think that was probably one of the key motivations as to why they did this. Coming up after the break, and we've got a ton of more news to cover. We're going to go to your calls as well. They're now saying on MSNBC, and this is Melissa Harris Perry, we're going to go to this clip after the break, that the New York Times was wrong to publish the photo of Tashfeen Malik, the San Bernardino shooter, the wife of Saeed Farouk. They were wrong to publish the photo because it might have been offensive to Muslims. Melissa Harris Perry actually said that. This is the same presenter who says that your children belong to the state. She wears tampon earrings, and now she's saying that it's offensive to Muslims that the New York Times published the photograph of this terrorist. And she's not the only one. An Al Jazeera employee, as I tweeted a couple of days ago, said that it was wrong to show the terrorist's face, quote, because it's disrespectful. It hurts the poor jihadist's feelings, boo-hoo. If she was wearing a burqa that covers her face, it's disrespectful to show a picture without. So he was actually concerned about the feelings of the dead terrorist and her family simply because the mainstream media were now showing her picture, which they didn't for at least 2 days. In fact, 3 days, they refused to show her face whatsoever. But now they're complaining about it. Melissa Harris Perry on MSNBC is saying that the jihadists might have had their feelings hurt by the fact that the New York Times published the photo of the woman partly responsible for the massacre in San Bernardino. Stay tuned. We're going to play the clip after the break. This is the Alex Jones Show Live, 4th hour overdrive. Stay tuned. We're back live, 4th hour overdrive, the Alex Jones Show. I'm Paul Joseph Watson. Deep Cleanse is available at the InfoWars store. Of course, we've got free store-wide shipping right now at InfoWarsStore.com. And you can get $5 off Deep Cleanse, scientifically formulated to use powerful nanocolloidal zeolites and organic ingredients to aid the body's normal function of cleansing itself from chemicals and toxic metals. So that's available right now at InfoWarsStore.com. Now, before the break, I mentioned this clip, which we're going to go to. Melissa Harris Perry says that the New York Times was wrong to show the face of the San Bernardino terrorist. Here's the clip.
And then all of a sudden we find out they're Muslim. Bam, gun violence is out of the question. We start talking about terrorism, and I'm extremely disturbed. I mean, I looked at the New York Times cover today. Here you have a whole op-ed on gun control. Great. Right next to it is pictures from the apartment of things that I have in my house.
Yes.
Like, these are things that all Muslims have in their house. There's nothing about that tells you a story about what terrorism looked like. So you're telling me that when my friends who are not Muslim come into my home and see a Quran or see frames on the wall with a scripture from my religion, is that supposed to tell you something? I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. We would never do that to anyone, and we didn't do that to Deer.
Yep.
We didn't do that to Roof. I'm tired of the double standards of how we treat Muslims.
I mean,
they are the perpetrators.
that image, and then also right next to it, an image of the shooting suspect there in hijab, and that idea that, like, okay, this is what terrorism looks like. For me, that is a difference, and it is a material and meaningful difference.
There you have it. Melissa Harris Perry saying that the New York Times publishing the photo of the terrorist, the woman who helped Farouk shoot dead, 14 people in San Bernardino, that was wrong, insensitive, and offensive to Muslims, merely showing a picture of the terrorist. This is the same woman who says that your children belong to the state, the same woman who wears tampon earrings on her show. And again, she's come out with absolute lunacy, saying that it boo-hoo, it might offend the feelings of the poor jihadists, because the New York Times dared to publish this photo, when in fact the mainstream media waited days before even showing the face of this woman. Again, people were speculating that could be because they didn't want to show her without her full face covering, because it might upset the feelings of the poor jihadists. Again, the special snowflakes that we should censor our own media to cater for. As I mentioned before the break, Melissa Harris Perry was not the only one who was upset about the media publishing this photograph. Hashim Saeed of Al Jazeera said in a tweet, "It's disrespectful." Again, to publish the photo of the terrorist is disrespectful to who? Other terrorists? I mean, are white people supposed to be all butthurt and offended if they publish a picture of Dylan Roof, for God's sake? He said it's offensive. If she was wearing a burqa that covers her face, it's disrespectful to show a picture without. So he's claiming that just because normally she wore a full-face burqa, because they had this image which showed the entirety of her face, that was offensive. It hurt the feelings of the poor jihadists. So it was wrong to do that. And then, of course, we had Linda Stasi of the New York Daily News publishing a vitriolic, hate-filled article blaming the victim of the attack for provoking the shooting, blaming this Messianic Christian Jew who had, God forbid, arguments with Farouk, the shooter, about religion, about politics before the shooting. She basically implied that he was equally responsible for the massacre as the actual gunman. Quote, they were two hate-filled, bigoted municipal employees interacting in one department. Now 13 innocent people are dead in unspeakable carnage. So she actually piles him in with Farouk like he's the culprit. He's responsible for all the innocent people that died simply because he was against ISIS. He was a conservative. He supported the NRA. He disliked Planned Parenthood. And because of that, even though he was brutally gunned down dead, according to this sick New York Daily News columnist, he's equally to blame for the massacre. This is how the left reacts. I mean, imagine if somebody on the right, imagine if Ann Coulter or Bill O'Reilly had come out and blamed the victims, the black churchgoers, the victims of the Dylan Roof massacre, for the massacre which killed them because they said something political a few days before. Imagine the outrage on the left if that happened. Yet somebody on the left, a regressive leftist who is not a real liberal, says it, and, you know, it's move along, nothing to see here. So again, absolutely outrageous comments. And again, Melissa Harris Perry of MSNBC saying that it was offensive to publish the photo of the terrorist. Absolutely astounding. We'll be back with more news and your calls on the 4th hour overdrive of the Alex Jones Show. Stay tuned, Infowars.com. We're back on the Alex Jones Show live 4th hour overdrive. I'm your host, Paul Joseph Watson. And of course, Obama gave his big speech last night in which he said that Farouk, the San Bernardino killer, was following a perverted interpretation of Islam. That's how Obama framed it, as if the Quran contained no directions to violence whatsoever, which of course we know that it does. We've had this whole cloud of political correctness in the aftermath of the San Bernardino shooting. We've had liberals try to make the justification that maybe Farouk carried out the rampage because he was offended by the Christmas party. Maybe he was offended because they made fun of his beard. These are some of the ridiculous speculations that have been trotted out in the aftermath of this shooting, when, of course, we know where he derives his motivation from. It's not hard to guess when it happens over and over again, when ISIS itself cites passages in the Quran, says that they attacked people in Paris because they brought corruption upon the earth, again, following directly the commandments of Muhammad from the Quran. But Obama says basically Islam is a religion of peace and that it's nothing to do with the Quran, that Farouk was following a perverted interpretation of Islam. Well, this video just went up on Infowars.com about an hour ago, and we're going to premiere the clip now on the Alex Jones Show. Islam is not a religion of peace. Here's the clip. Islam is not a religion of peace. Anyone who still claims this in 2015 is either stupid or they're a liar. Every time I say that Islam is not a religion of peace, I get death threats from Muslims. How dare you say that Islam is violent? We're going to prove you wrong by violently killing you. At least 10 Muslim countries impose the death penalty for apostasy. They execute people for saying they're no longer Muslims. Polls show that the majority of Muslims support killing people for saying they're no longer Muslim. Executing people for not believing the same thing as you is violent and wrong. It's not peaceful.
Because it's the only religion that acts like the mafia, that will kill you if you say the wrong thing, draw the wrong picture, or write the wrong book.
At least 10 Muslim countries imposed the death penalty for homosexuality. They execute people for their sexual preference. Polls show that the majority of Muslims are completely intolerant of homosexuality. Executing people for being gay is violent and wrong. It's not peaceful. At least 11 Muslim countries, or ruling tribes in those countries, stone women to death. They stone women to death for allegedly committing adultery. Rape victims are also stoned to death. Polls show that the majority of Muslims in these countries support stoning women to death for adultery. Stoning women to death for committing adultery or being raped is violent and wrong. It's not peaceful. Whenever Muslims carry out terror attacks, they cite the Quran as justification. The Quran contains a plethora of passages that directly encourage Muslims to kill non-Muslims. I'll leave a list in the description. Note that there isn't a Quran 2, which is only read by radicals or extremists. There's only one Quran, in which acts of violence are specifically encouraged. Although a minority, a disturbing number of Muslims support terror attacks. For example, 39% in Afghanistan and 29% in Egypt. Killing innocent people in terror attacks is violent and wrong. It's not peaceful. But there's over 1 billion Muslims who would never commit terror, kill gay people, stone women to death, or execute apostates. Right. But they subscribe to a belief system which advocates all of those things and carries them out. So they have two choices. Either continue to advocate all those violent things, or acknowledge that Islam is violent and not a religion of peace, and agree that Islam is in dire need of a reformation. But most victims of terror attacks are Muslims. Right, so they have two choices. Either continue to deny that Islam is violent and keep being killed in terror attacks, or acknowledge that Islam is violent and not a religion of peace, and agree that Islam is in dire need of a reformation. Saying most victims of terror are Muslims is not an argument. But what about the Crusades?
Remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ.
The fact that Christians fought against Muslims in a military campaign nearly 1,000 years ago does not excuse the fact that Muslim countries in 2015 kill gay people, stone women to death, and execute Muslims who give up on the faith of Islam. Saying, but what about the Crusades, is not an argument. But what about Western foreign policy? The fact that Western military forces have launched unprovoked acts of regime change in the Middle East is terrible, and I've been a vocal critic of those wars for the entirety of my adult life. History has proven that such wars only empower violent jihadists. But that doesn't excuse Muslim countries in 2015 killing gay people, stoning women to death, and executing those who give up on the faith of Islam. Western foreign policy has had no effect on laws derived from the Quran in countries like Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, which impose the death penalty for these supposed crimes. Saying, but what about Western foreign policy, is not an argument. But what about violent passages in the Old Testament? Unlike Islamic countries, there are virtually no Christian nations besides Uganda that kill gay people, execute apostates, and stone women to death. That's because Christianity had a reformation in the 1500s, which purged it of its most intolerant and violent aspects. Islam hasn't had a reformation. That's why it's still intolerant and violent. Pointing to intolerant passages in the Old Testament, which no one has acted on for hundreds of years, is not an argument. Saying, but what about violent passages in the Old Testament, is not an argument. How do we move towards reforming Islam? Well, first, we don't shout down the voices of reform by calling them bigots, apostates, and Islamophobes. We don't automatically denounce anyone who criticizes the violent and intolerant parts of the Quran as a racist. Islam is not a race. And we don't excuse or hide the fact that Islam is violent by redundantly citing an array of supposed justifications which are completely unrelated. So I welcome your comments, but here's a challenge. Try to rebut my argument without using the words bigot, racist, or Islamophobe. Try to directly address my argument without citing the Crusades, Western foreign policy, or passages in the Old Testament. None of those things disprove that Islam is a violent and intolerant belief system. Also, claiming I'm a Zionist shill, a crypto Jew, or a Christian fundamentalist with no proof is not an argument. And again, Islam is not a race. It's an ideology.
It's gross. It's racist. It's not.
Saying it's racist to criticize Islam is like saying it's racist to criticize socialism or atheism. That's not an argument. Islam is not a religion of peace. But I challenge you to prove me wrong. But please, just try and lay off the death threats, because that's not an argument. Okay, there you have it, the video. Islam is not a religion of peace. Get that out, share it around. It could go viral by the looks of it. But of course, the challenge I made in the video is rebut my argument that Islam is not a religion of peace without calling me a bigot, an Islamophobe, or a racist, because Islam is not a race, without referring to the Crusades, a military campaign where Christians fought Muslims nearly 1,000 years ago, without referring to US foreign policy, which has no effect whatsoever on countries like Saudi Arabia, who make laws that lead to women being stoned and gays being beheaded. Try and rebut my argument without referring to any of those things. Try and rebut my argument without referring to passages in the Old Testament, which aren't even relevant anymore because nobody's acted on them for 500 years or more. There was a Christian Reformation in the 16th century. There hasn't been a Reformation of Islam to purge it of its intolerant and violent aspects, which is why these terrorists still cite the Quran when they carry out these attacks. And of course, you can't really call yourself a, quote, moderate Muslim if you still believe in stoning women and executing gay people. So again, we need Muslims from within the faith to lead this march to reform Islam, which some of them are, to be fair, and people, ex-Muslims who have left, they're the ones on the front lines, people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, trying to reform Islam and, of course, being shouted down at every single point by both Islamists and the left, who have made this alliance of intolerance, and they're perfectly fine with gays being beheaded, women being stoned to death, because they never criticize it and they never get to the root of it, which is Islam itself and the Quran. So get that video, share it out, and we can try and reach some people. Of course, I say try and rebut my argument without calling me a racist, a bigot, or an Islamophobe. All the comments on YouTube, negative ones anyway, are calling me a racist, a bigot, and an Islamophobe. So they've completely failed, or they've not bothered to watch the actual video. We're going to go to some of your calls in a minute, but I wanted to cover this story. Of course, on Saturday night, we had a knife-wielding jihadist in an underground station in London who slashed someone's neck, nearly killed them, while chanting out, "This is for Syria." New York Daily News reports knife-wielding London terrorist had ISIS images, Paris attack photos on his phone. But again, nothing to do with the religion of peace, obviously. In fact, we had people on the news saying this might be just mental illness. He's shouting out, "This is for Syria." In other words, this is for ISIS, who the UK is now bombing in Syria. He's got photos of ISIS on his phone. He's got photos of the Paris massacre on his phone. But again, nothing to do with Islam. The knife-wielding nut accused of terrorizing a London underground station over the weekend kept images of ISIS and its attacks on his phone, prosecutors said Monday. Suspected terrorist Muhaddin Maya, 29, was hauled to Westminster Magistrates Court in a police van to face an attempted murder charge for his attack. So you had this guy slashing people's throats in the underground. It was all caught on camera. And how did the cuckolded British left respond within hours? With a hashtag, "You ain't no Muslim bruv," because one of the people filming this jihadist carrying out his attack said the words, "You ain't no Muslim bruv," in an attempt to detach his actions, his violent actions, from the religion of Islam. And then, of course, the politically correct, obsessed left jumped on this. It started trending on Twitter, and it made everybody feel a little bit better because now we don't have to blame it on Islam because it's the religion of peace, even though it's clearly not. But, you know, so long as everybody was able to virtue signal and earn social brownie points with all their trendy friends, then it was all okay. Everybody felt a bit better. But again, someone made the point on Twitter after this hashtag, "You ain't no Muslim, bruv," was trending. The bar has been set so low that a Muslim who's not in favor of random stabbings is hailed as a hero. And that says it all, because the guy obviously saying this was a Muslim too. But as Pat Condell points out, are we sure "you ain't no Muslim, bruv" was directed at the attacker and not at the bearded cop holding him down? Because, of course, one of the police officers who apprehended this terrorist, who was black, was Muslim, quite clearly. So the guy who said "you ain't no Muslim, bruv" could have been talking about the cop who apprehended the terrorist. He might not have even been addressing his comment to the terrorist. So if that turns out to be the case, it's going to be a spectacular defeat for the narrative of the leftists and the regressive left, those obsessed with political correctness, because they tried to claim this to point out that this attacker, this jihadist, they tried to divorce his acts, his violent actions, from the religion of Islam. And that was the entire narrative in the day after the attack. It could blow up spectacularly if that proves to be the case. But now he's in court, so we'll continue to follow that story. Let's go to one of these callers. Daryl in Texas, you're on the air. Go ahead, Daryl.
Hello, how are you?
Good, Daryl. What's on your mind today?
Well, those are good points you were making. I wanted to also make a comment on the fact that, you know, if someone is getting offended that her face is being shown, why aren't they directing their outrage towards her? Because if she didn't want her face shown, she shouldn't have done that. And it's like, if we have a KKK member and someone outs them by showing their face in the newspaper, we're not worried that they offended the KKK members. So everyone should be directing their outrage towards her for sort of making a breach of Islam by forcing the media to show her face. I mean, the outrage should be directed towards her. I also wanted to make a comment about the Christmas lighting ceremony. From what I understand, the governor of California canceled the Christmas lighting ceremony, and this is not the way you fight this type of thing. You do the exact opposite. What you do is you say, if the Christmas tree offended the person, then let's put a Christmas tree on every corner. And then you say something, and I'm going to say 3 words that I think are going to have to be said sooner or later, because you can tell people no. You can tell Congress no. You can tell supposed lawmakers, you can tell them no all you want to. People that are violating your rights and assaulting you, you can be nice to them and you can tell them no. But eventually you have to draw a line in the sand, and you have to look them in the eyes and say 3 words, and those words are, make your move. So that point is when you give no more and you say no and you mean it. And so they should put a Christmas tree on every corner and simply say, make your move.
Okay, Daryl, thanks for the call. I vehemently agree with that. And of course, the kind of attitude that you're talking about is the same kind of attitude that we saw after the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris back in January, which is segments of the left, which again are allied with Islamists, blamed the cartoonists for the massacre. They said they were provoking the poor jihadists who had their special snowflake sensitive feelings hurt, and that in some way justified the brutal massacre of those cartoonists. We saw the same rhetoric after the Garland attack, which was thankfully stopped because of armed, responsible men with weapons. Unfortunately, none of the victims in San Bernardino had that protection. We'll be back. We're going to take one more call, I think, after the break and finish up on the news. This is the Alex Jones Show, 4th Hour Overdrive. Stay tuned, Infowars.com. We're back, final segment of 4th Hour Overdrive on the Alex Jones Show. Remember, InfoWarsStore.com. We've got Deep Cleanse, scientifically formulated to use powerful nanocolloidal zeolites and organic ingredients to aid the body's normal function of cleansing itself from chemicals and toxic metals. Free store-wide shipping as well. This is going to make a good Christmas gift, as will all the other products. And, of course, it helps us build the platform. It's key to continue your support by purchasing the products at InfoWarsStore.com. Well, Barack Obama continues to be the most prolific gun salesman that America has ever seen. Reuters is reporting Americans stock up on weapons after California shooting. Market Watch, this just broke, gun stocks rally after Obama's primetime address on terrorism. Shares of the two publicly traded gun makers rallied on Monday, a day after President Barack Obama gave a primetime address calling for a modest reduction in the availability of firearms. Of course, he's calling for the TSA no-fly list to be linked to a no-gun-buy list, which ironically will create a list of Muslims, just as Donald Trump was criticized for calling for. It will create a surveillance list mainly comprised of Muslims because they make up a significant portion of the TSA no-fly list, so Obama can call for it. It's trendy. If Trump calls for it in a different context, it's racist and Islamophobic. Let's go to one more call here. Kevin in California, you're on the air. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Good to hear from you. Yeah, I've been trying to call so many times. I'm glad to finally get through, but I wanted to, bang the drum a little more on this subject with, the Christmas party out ban. It's ridiculous, and one, it's completely anti-American. This country was founded with the cornerstone of the basis of religious freedom and the ability to express it. With the right and left hand being, the right to defend ourselves equally to whoever might oppress us, revising it for modern day. And, of course, our right arm for freedom of speech to defend ourselves, basically to defend our religious freedom. It's really almost like the keystone to our entire declaration. And I think it's time. This is kind of like one of those last straw issues. I think everybody should be upset about this. I think anybody who openly says that we should restrict our religious freedoms needs to be prosecuted. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I fully agree, and it's this idea that we've got to be tolerant of all these foreign cultures that are coming in, which we have been completely tolerant. Yet when it comes to Americans, for example, at universities, having Christmas cards, sending Christmas cards, taking mistletoe to a Christmas party, even the decor being red and green. Top universities across America are now sending out advisories saying that that's not politically correct. That might upset someone of a different faith. So it all has to be this generic holiday party BS. So again, we have to accept this invading culture, which in many cases is completely intolerant and anti-American. Yet Americans can't go to Christmas parties, can barely even say the word Merry Christmas, can't exchange Christmas cards, can't have, red and green decor. It's completely ludicrous. And again, we have this whole Islamophobia meme, which Obama harped on about last night. If you look at the stats, only 16% of hate crime attacks in the US are against Muslims. 55% are against Jews. So when they bring in this meme of Islamophobia to try and shut down dissent, criticism of the refugee program, for example, it's completely fraudulent. That's going to wrap it up for the 4th hour of the Alex Jones Show. Remember, go to the InfoWars store to get all the products, support the platform, and get that video out. Islam is not a religion of peace. Share that video. We'll be back tomorrow with a live show. InfoWars Nightly News tonight. InfoWars.com.